My name is Elena Waters. I'm 29, a coastal engineer and the founder of a company that predicts how shorelines will disappear long before anyone realizes they're slipping away. I was raised in Santa Cruz, 3 blocks from the ocean, but light years from feeling seen. My sister Sierra was the kind of child who earned standing ovations just for showing up. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one who learned to solder wires before I turned 10. I always assumed love meant shrinking to make room for someone else. When my wedding day finally came, no one from my family showed up. They were at Sierra's engagement party instead. Same day, different coast. That's when I stopped asking for a seat at their table and decided to build my own. The first time I realized I was invisible. I was 8 years old, blowing out candles on a cake I hadn't asked for. I wanted a lighthouse. I was obsessed with them. Something about one tower of light being strong enough to guide strangers through fog made me believe I could be that for someone, maybe for myself. Instead, my mother brought out a pink cake with ballet slippers on top. We already had the mold from Sierra's last recital, she said, as if efficiency were a form of affection. Everyone clapped. For Sierra, who twirled beside me in a tutu she insisted on wearing just for fun. In the photo from that day, everyone's faces turned toward her, even the dog. There was another photo that hurt, more quieter, sharper. A beach trip, all smiles and sunscreen. Years later, I found that same picture again in a family album, but someone had trimmed the edge. You could still see the strap of my swimsuit, one shoulder peeking out. My face was gone. It looked more balanced that way, my mom explained. I told her it was fine. I was always telling people it was fine. Sierra was the family's golden hour. Everything softened around her. She was loud, luminous, dramatic. I was logical. I fixed the stereo when it crackled. I built towers from driftwood in the backyard. No one clapped. But when Sierra cried on stage during a 5th-grade recital, my dad stood up and applauded. Like she won a Tony. There were 1,000 moments like that, moments you don't even register as betrayal until you look back and realize your childhood was a long, quiet process of being cropped out. I remember bringing home my first straight-A report card in 10th grade. My mom was frosting yet another cake for one of Sierra's dance shows. Good job, she said without looking up. You're lucky school comes easy to you. Lucky? That word still makes something harden behind my ribs. I wasn't lucky. I worked. But Sierra was gifted, so I was always the one who didn't need the attention dot by the time I turned 16. I had learned not to ask. Not for the front seat, not for space, not for applause. I spent nights in the garage surrounded by tools and the low hum of possibility. I rebuilt fans, radios, even a desk lamp that flickered to life the night Sierra won a dance scholarship. They took her out for dinner. I stayed home and rewired the entire baseboard heater. People always say resentment is loud. They're wrong. It's quiet. It's the silence after a joke no one hears. It's the corner of the photo you're not in. It's blowing out candles on a cake that isn't yours. Still, I built small piers, lopsided birdhouses, a driftwood ramp that reached into the tide. I didn't know it yet, but I was already constructing something I'd need years later, proof that I could hold weight even if no one leaned on me. One night, Sierra stumbled during a recital and missed her final pose. She burst into tears. My mom rushed the stage like she'd been shot. My dad yelled, "That's our brave girl," as if it were some noble act of failure. Meanwhile, I stood at the edge of the hallway with a soldering iron in my hand, watching the house flicker with crisis and defection. I said nothing. I returned to the garage and rewired the switch that had been buzzing all week. The light came on steady. That was love to me, silent, functional, unglamorous. The world didn't clap when it happened, but I knew what I'd done. I always knew. People like me learn early how to read the room and repair what's broken. Even if that broken thing is ourselves. When I left for college, no one cried. My dad carried my suitcase to the car and said, "You're always the steady one, Elena." Like that was enough to send a girl into the world. I didn't argue. I just stared out the passenger window as we drove down Highway 1, watching the ocean shimmer like a promise I hadn't yet earned. That was the moment I stopped waiting for anyone to notice my light. I decided I'd build the damn lighthouse myself. At UC Santa Barbara. The ocean wasn't just a view, it was a presence. You could feel it in your shoes, in your sheets, in the way the wind curled around your throat at night. I lived in a dorm with no air conditioning, where the windows stuck on humid days and the walls hummed from someone else's playlist. But I didn't care. It was freedom. No Sierra, no parents, just the sea and me and the sound of old pipes rattling like applause from ghosts. I didn't fit in right away. Most people were louder than I was, shinier somehow. But I had my own way of surviving. I worked 2 jobs, one in the campus cafe, another at a coastal erosion lab, and I spent every spare hour in the engineering studio. Wood, metal, equations, they made sense. People still didn't, not until Talia Chen walked in. She was late to intro to marine systems, hair in a messy knot, hoodie half-zipped, and she said to the professor, "Sorry, a sea lion hijacked my morning." Long story. Then she sat next to me and said, "You look like someone who understands graphs and people equally, which is unfair." I didn't laugh, not then. But I let her borrow my notes, and that was the beginning. Talia was relentless in the best way. Half Chinese American, half caffeine, fully opinionated. She studied marine biology but wanted to fix policy, not just fish. She was the first person who asked what I was building in my free time and waited for the answer. That same semester, I met Kai Rivera. He was across the lab, hunched over a sketchpad filled with blueprints that looked like dreams. His hands were always ink-stained. When I asked what he was drawing, he said, "Wave-powered pure turbines. Might be useless, but the ocean doesn't care if you're wrong. It just comes back." I didn't realize it at the time, but that sentence would stick to my ribs for years. The 3 of us, Talia, Kai, and I, started staying late after class, arguing over concepts and eating vending machine cookies like they were currency. The idea came slowly. A company that used small autonomous drones to monitor coastal erosion, feeding real-time data to towns too poor to pay consultants. We called it Blue Current, something quiet, powerful, necessary. The first drone we built looked like a rejected toaster. It crashed into a tide pool and fried its own battery within minutes. We laughed for a solid 10 seconds before I sat down and said, "Okay, we're rebuilding it." That was always my answer. Rebuild it. Kai handled the math. His notebooks were full of impossible angles and physics jokes. Talia worked like a human switchboard, hustling for mentors and small grants. I did the wiring, the design, the pitch decks. We lived on top ramen and low-stakes delusion. Nobody clapped. That was fine. When we got our first campus seed fund, $3,000 and a pat on the back, I called home. My mom said, "That's nice. Sierra just got signed for a choreography residency in New York. Can you believe it?" I said, "No, I really can't." She didn't notice the sarcasm. That summer, while Sierra posted Instagram stories from Manhattan rooftops, I slept on the floor of our 1-bedroom apartment with blueprints taped above my head. Kai and I took turns pulling night shifts to test prototypes in the tide. Talia gave up an internship to write code from a cafe Wi-Fi signal that cut out every hour. When we finally got one drone to fly out, scan, and return without exploding, we screamed. Kai popped a warm root beer. Talia cried. I didn't. I just stood in the surf, soaked to the knees, thinking, this is mine. No one had to give it to me. We pitched at a coastal startup showcase that fall. Our display table was wobbly. Our drone was still glitchy. But our mission was clean, to give fragile coastlines a voice before they vanished. We didn't win, but we were noticed. A week later, a marina near Monterey asked if we could map the sands around their docks. They were losing shoreline and needed help predicting damage. It was a small job, but it was ours. We charged less than minimum wage and poured the payment into better batteries. Kai said, "This is where it begins." And it was. Contracts came slowly, then steadily. We mapped 3 towns in 6 months. A researcher at Caltech cited our data. One night, as we were calibrating a unit by the Santa Barbara cliffs, I stood next to Kai watching the drone's soft blue light pulse over the dark water. He said, "It's strange to build something that sees everything except you." It wasn't meant to cut, but it did. He was right. My whole life had been quiet accomplishments and silent victories. And now I had built a company that observed invisibly, without recognition, just like me. I should have been proud. Instead, I felt hollow. I called home again. No one answered. A week later, Sierra posted a photo of her engagement ring. Caption, "He proposed on a rooftop in Rome. Family is everything." That night, I rewired our drone's night vision sensors until dawn. My fingers bled from the soldering iron. They couldn't see me, but that didn't mean I wasn't there. I'd make the world see what they refused to. The first time I said it out loud, "We're getting married," it didn't feel real. I was sitting on the floor of our tiny office, surrounded by spare drone parts and half-eaten takeout containers. Kai looked up from his laptop, blinked once, then broke into a slow grin that made the whole room feel brighter. "Yeah," he said, like I just suggested surfing at sunrise, not starting a life together. We didn't do a big proposal. No champagne, no rooftop, just quiet certainty over burnt coffee. That was us. I didn't want extravagance. I wanted belonging. We chose a vineyard in Big Sur remote, sun-drenched, surrounded by wind-shaped oaks and the kind of stillness that made you remember to breathe. We booked it 8 months out, not because it was fancy, it wasn't, but because it felt like it understood us. Weathered, beautiful, simple. For weeks, the planning was quiet joy. Kai built spreadsheets like puzzles. I sketched lantern arrangements on the backs of drone schematics. Talia volunteered to design the invites. No metallic fonts, no pastel roses, just thick recycled paper pressed with ocean ink and hand-tied twine. Honest doubt, we agreed to keep it small. 25 people, only the ones who'd ever actually shown up. One night, 2 months out, my phone rang. The contact flashed Sierra. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not since her ring post. Her voice was all breathless excitement, the kind that always preceded something selfish. "Milo and I just booked our engagement party," she chirped. "Guess what? Same day as your wedding. Isn't that wild?" There was a beat of silence where I waited for her to laugh, to say just kidding, to offer some olive branch. She didn't. "That's the same day, Sierra." "I know. But the venue in San Diego was only available that weekend, and his parents are flying in from Europe. We really couldn't move it. But don't worry, we'll totally celebrate you another time. Another time later. You're independent. You'll understand." I hung up before my voice cracked. 10 minutes later, my mom called. "Sweetheart," she began, using that tone, the one that always sounded like she was patting my head from 100 feet away. "I just spoke to Sierra. Don't be upset, okay? Milo's family can only do that weekend. You're so independent. You'll understand." There it was again. Independent, the word they used when they wanted to feel guiltless for leaving me out. For years, it had been their shield, their permission slip. I sat on the edge of our tiny bed that night, watching Kai fix a loose cabinet hinge like it was a meditation. "So," he said without turning around, "what do you want to do?" I looked at him, steady and soft, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. "We keep the date," I said. "I'm done moving for people who never show up." He smiled and nodded once, like it had already been decided in his bones. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at my desk in the dark. I opened a folder I'd labeled someday. It was full of bookmarked listings, dream homes I'd saved like little secrets. One caught my eye, a weathered estate perched on a bluff in Big Sur. Whitewashed walls, a wooden pier, a small lighthouse, old paint chipped. No longer working, the house didn't scream money. It whispered history. I stared at the photos for a long time. Then I opened a notebook and began sketching not a mansion, but a life. A table that stretched toward the water, lanterns above it, chairs filled by people who chose to be there. When the first light of morning slid through the blinds, Kai stirred and blinked over at me. "What are you doing up?" "Just looking at something," I said, turning the screen toward him. He sat up slowly, studied the photos, then looked at me. "You're thinking of moving the wedding there, aren't you?" I nodded. "If they won't come to our table," I said, "maybe it's time to build one they can't ignore." He reached for my hand, still warm from the coffee I hadn't realized I'd finished. "Then let's make it unforgettable." Not out of spite, but out of truth. 2 days later, we drove up the coast with the radio low and the windows down. The air got lighter with every mile, salty, quite like something in the world had been waiting to exhale. The house was exactly as it looked in the pictures, maybe more. It didn't pretend to be untouched. There were scratches in the beams, wind-warped railings, painted by storms, but it stood tall, honest. The caretaker met us at the gate, an old man with sea-glass eyes and sun-cracked skin. "It's been waiting for the right people," he said. "Someone who sees it." I didn't cry. I just stepped onto the deck, looked out at the pier stretching into the sea, and let myself believe for once this could be ours. And then I saw the lighthouse short, weathered, still standing just like me. I ran my hand over the railing, already making mental notes about what needed reinforcement. Kai was already measuring angles in his head. "This isn't a venue," I whispered. "It's a reclamation," he nodded. "It's the home you deserved all along." I looked back at the house, at the lighthouse, at the path to the pier, and I knew if they won't come to my table, I'll build one they can't look away from. We signed the deed on a Friday morning with the kind of pen that feels heavier than it looks. The caretaker watched from the kitchen, leaning on the counter like he'd seen this moment before, not just once, but in lifetimes. When I passed the pen to Kai and he scribbled his name beneath mine, it wasn't just ownership. It was a decision, a vow. We wouldn't wait for belonging. We'd build it. That same afternoon, we rolled up our sleeves and started peeling back layers of salt dust in silence. The house creaked like an old violin, weathered, but not broken. We sanded beams, replaced loose railings, and cleared the path to the lighthouse. The more we worked, the more the house exhaled, like it had been holding its breath for years. Kai handled the bones of the play structure, safety, load-bearing integrity. I designed the heart. We decided early, no generic wedding chairs, no rented crystal. We would build a long, narrow table ourselves from driftwood we scavenged along the shore. A table that would stretch from the courtyard all the way to the edge of the pier. The image haunted me in the best way. A line of light, laughter, and intention reaching toward the water like an offering. "This table," Kai said, sketching the layout on butcher paper, "isn't about status. It's about presence." Everyone who sits here showed up. Talia arrived 2 days later with a suitcase full of work boots, extension cords, and loose-leaf tea. She barely hugged me before blurting out, "Okay, what's falling apart, and how do I help fix it?" We gave her a room that smelled faintly of lavender and seaweed. She unpacked faster than anyone I'd ever met, then went straight to sanding floorboards without being asked. While Kai and I handled the structure, Talia organized everything else: lighting, power sources, guest logistics. She even found a retired glassblower in nearby Carmel to create hand-blown lanterns. Small glowing orbs to hang from the eaves and trees and across the pier. Like stars descending to watch over us. I handled the invitations myself. Not printed, not perfect. Each one handwritten on heavy paper, pressed with dried seagrass, and sealed with wax shaped like an anchor. 27 total. That's it. No extended cousins who never called. No family friends who'd forgot my name for a decade. Only the ones who had ever made me feel real. Each envelope carried a single line: "You're not just invited. You're seen." I mailed them from the tiny post office in Big Sur, the wind pulling at the corners of the stack as I slid them through the slot. Then we waited. The first reply came from Arya, my cousin, who once gave me $20 and a birthday card with a note that read, "For ice cream and escape." She messaged me within minutes. "Tell me what to wear." "I'm there." Then Eli from Seattle, a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years, sent a selfie holding a boarding pass and said, "Didn't even hesitate. You deserved this 10 years ago." One by one, the replies came. Not through RSVP cards, but texts, calls, voicemails. Every message felt like a small undoing, like stitches being pulled out of an old wound. Letting the air finally touch. My grandmother left a voicemail that made me cry in the middle of sanding the front steps. "My darling girl," she said, her voice raspy but sure. "I may not walk fast anymore, but I still know where to go. Save me a seat by the sea." Talia and I started calling it the real tide table, half joke, half movement. She made a group chat with the same name, filled with emojis of waves and lighthouses and sea salt hearts. Every hour a new message would arrive. Someone else booking a flight, finding an old suit, buying extra sunscreen. Not a single one from my parents. Not Sierra. But that didn't matter because for the first time, the silence didn't sting. It simply meant space. Space for people who chose me not out of duty, but out of truth. Kai worked on the table for days. He collected slabs of driftwood already worn by tide and time, planed them smooth, then sealed them with oils. We mixed it ourselves. Each board carried its own scars. That's what made it honest. That's what made it beautiful. You're giving the ocean a second chance to hold people, I teased. Kai smirked. Or maybe it's giving us one. Every evening, we lit the lanterns strung between the house and the lighthouse. As the sky darkened, their glow shimmered across the water like a trail of constellations. The sea changed every day. At dawn, it looked pink like forgiveness. By noon, sharp and silver like clarity. At night, it deepened into indigo, the color of peace. Some nights, I sat barefoot at the edge of the pier, feeling the wood Kai had shaped beneath me, watching the tide rise slowly around it. It felt like the water was giving us permission to stay, and we were listening. I never once refreshed Sierra's Instagram. I didn't want to see her dress fittings or imported centerpieces. I didn't want to know if my mother helped her choose a venue. Because what we were building here didn't need comparison. It only needed truth. One night, as the wind picked up and the lanterns danced above us, Kai sat beside me. "You ever wonder," he asked, "if the ocean's been waiting this whole time for someone to stay long enough to notice?" I looked at the glowing lights, the table, the water kissing the pier. Maybe it was just waiting for us to stop waiting. He nodded, and we both knew without saying it. They always said I was lucky. But luck doesn't build lighthouses. The morning of the wedding arrived in quiet gold. No alarms, no frantic schedules. No bridal party scrambling in matching robes. Just lights spilling through the salt-fogged windows of the Big Sur villa and the sound of Kai, humming as he brewed coffee barefoot outside. The lanterns we'd strung across the pier swung gently in the breeze, their glass catching morning light as if holding it just for us. Talia was in the kitchen with a box of fresh-baked bread and sea lavender tucked behind her ear. She winked at me. No one's going to be able to look away from this day. She was right. By late afternoon, the courtyard had come alive. Not crowded, not flashy, just full. 25 chairs, everyone filled by someone who had chosen to be there. Grandma Ruth in a seafoam shawl. Eli with his guitar. Arya snapping Polaroids and laughing with her whole body. Marco, our chef, humming Sinatra in the kitchen as he tossed citrus over grilled halibut like stardust. The table Kai, built stretched from the back deck all the way to the edge of the pier. Driftwood polished smooth. Each board a memory held together by love and tenacity. Sea lavender and olive branches lined the center. The scent of salt and citrus drifted through the air. At the far end of the pier, Kai waited. Simple white shirt, sanded vest, hair tousled by the wind. He looked like the ocean had carved him out and left him there for me. I stepped out barefoot. No veil, no fanfare, just a soft ivory dress that moved like tidewater and a single sprig of lavender in my hair. As I walked down the table's length, everyone stood instinctively, quietly. Grandma Ruth raised a tiny shell in her wrinkled hand, smiling like it was a blessing. The sound of the waves filled the space where violins might have played. When I reached Kai, I felt the wind tug at the hem of my dress like the ocean urging me forward. The efficient and old friend of Marco's cleared his throat and began. "Today's not about who declined to come. It's about who arrived." His voice was steady. So was my heart. I looked at the people around me, not out of nostalgia, but affirmation. This wasn't revenge. This was return. Then I turned to Kai and began my vows. To those who showed up, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my chest. Before the tide turned, when silence was safer, when it was easier not to, remind me that family isn't measured in invitations. It's measured in courage. I looked into Kai's eyes. "And you taught me that love doesn't need permission to stand. It just needs somewhere true to land." His hands tightened around mine, eyes soft. "You don't need the world to see you to be real," he said. "You just need one steady shore, someone who doesn't leave when the waves rise." And in that moment, under open sky and salt air, I knew I had found mine. The officiant declared us married. There was no grand orchestral swell, just laughter rolling across the pier like a tide that had finally come in. Kai kissed me slow, and sure as gulls wheeled overhead. Back at the table, Marco raised a ladle like a trophy. "Let's eat before the sea steals the tiramisu." The sun dipped low, casting a molten glow across the driftwood. Lanterns flickered to life one by one, their light dancing on the waves. Eli strummed his guitar as people filled plates, clinked glasses, and let the evening unfold with the ease of something earned. Then the photos began to go out. Arya posted the first one, the full length of the table glowing with lanterns. Kai and me at the center, the lighthouse behind us like a quiet sentinel. Caption: "When love shows up, so does family." Eli uploaded a video of Grandma Ruth raising her shell and declaring, May every tide bring us closer. Talia's story showed sea lavender swaying beside handwritten place cards that simply read, "You belong here." The post spread quickly, across the country. In a glossy San Diego ballroom wrapped in orchids and filtered light, phones began buzzing. Sierra's engagement party had been planned for months. Floor-length gowns, signature cocktails, imported orchids, choreographed speeches. But even expensive silence feels cold when it's filled with empty chairs. Guests began showing each other their screens. Wait, that's the rest of the family. Is that Grandma Ruth? Where are they? Sierra stood near the dessert table in a white jumpsuit mid-smile. Her fiancé leaned in, scrolling. "They're in California," he said quietly. "At your sister's wedding." Across the room, my mother froze mid-conversation. Her phone trembled in her manicured hand as she stared at a photo of me and Kai beneath the lighthouse, surrounded by people glowing with a joy that couldn't be staged. Her lips parted, but no words came. At the head of the room, the band kept playing, but no one clapped. No one danced. The orchids looked stiff, the glasses too full. And in that sudden vacuum, the truth landed. They hadn't just missed a wedding. They missed the moment the tide turned and they were standing on the wrong shore. The morning after the wedding, the house was quiet in a way that felt earned. Empty wine glasses sat on the driftwood table. Lavender petals clung to the wood like confetti left by the sea breeze. Someone had left a jacket on a chair. It smelled like rosemary and laughter. I padded through the kitchen barefoot, sunlight warming the tiles. Kai sat on the deck, wrapped in a blanket, coffee in hand, watching the tide. No one spoke. We didn't need to. Later, while folding linens and rinsing platters, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't have to check. I knew the rhythm of my mother's silence before she spoke. I answered. "Elena," she said softly. I waited. We saw the photos. Another pause. "You didn't tell us it would be that kind of wedding." "What kind of wedding is that, Mom?" I asked. "The kind people don't forget." I heard the weight in her voice. Not apology, not yet, but the stunned reckoning. That comes when your version of the story cracks open and light pours in. "Why did you never say how much it hurt?" She asked. I did. I said. "You just liked Sierra's volume better." She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. Then another voice came through, raspier, steadier. "Darling," Grandma Ruth said, "sometimes families forget how to see the quiet ones. But you were never invisible. You were just too far ahead." I swallowed. "Thank you for coming," I whispered. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," she said. And neither would they have if they'd had the courage. Later that week, Sierra called. She didn't apologize either. Not really. But her voice was different, less performative, more real. "I saw how they looked at you," she said. "I never knew people could love like that." "They can," I said, "when you stop asking them to perform." She hesitated. "Do you think there's still a place at your table?" "For me? I don't pull out chairs anymore," I told her. "But you're welcome to build one and sit." She didn't answer, but sometimes silence means listening. That Sunday, we hosted one last dinner before the house returned to stillness. Nothing fancy, just grilled vegetables, soft music, sea air. Aunt Marianne brought wine. Talia made lemon cake. Eli played guitar with one string out of tune. And no one cared. As the sky shifted from peach to indigo, I brought out a new chair, one Kai had built that morning. Simple, unfinished pine. I placed it at the end of the table. A white ribbon tied around the back. "Who's that for?" Arya asked. I looked at the empty seat. "For the girl who once waited to be chosen," I said. "She doesn't have to wait anymore." The ocean didn't roar. It simply curled against the rocks, steady and sure. I stood at the edge of the pier, lanterns glowing behind me, and breath in everything this place had become. Not a wedding venue. Not a rebellion. But a reclamation, because sometimes healing doesn't come with loud apologies or perfect closure. Sometimes healing is a long table made of driftwood, filled with people who showed up not because they had to, but because they saw you chose you, and in a world that taught me to wait quietly in the wings, I built something else. A home. A family. A light that didn't need permission to shine. You don't need a seat at someone else's table. Build your own and watch who dares to cross the tide.